Okay, we are super excited to be here today with Dan Buettner. Now, Dan Buettner is an explorer, a National Geographic Fellow, an award-winning journalist and producer, and New York Times best-selling author. He discovered 5 places in the world dubbed the Blue Zone's hotspots, where people live the longest and healthiest lives. Now, Dan now works in partnership with municipal governments, with large employers and health insurance companies to implement Blue Zone projects in communities around the planet. His books, The Blue Zones, Lessons for Living Longer from the People Who've Lived the Longest, Thrive, Finding Happiness the Blue Zone's Way, The Blue Zone's Solution, Eating and Living Like the World's Healthiest People, and The Blue Zones of Happiness are all national bestsellers because this guy is an absolute machine. Dan has appeared on the Today Show, on Oprah, on NBC Nightly News, on Good Morning America, and he's keynoted speeches at TED Med, Bill Clinton's Health Matters Initiative, and Google's Zeitgeist. Dan also holds 3 Guinness World Records in distance cycling, which I didn't even know about until right now. Dan, we are super excited for you to be here with us today. Thanks for taking the time.
I'm probably more excited to be here with you.
Love it. I love it. Okay. So, you've committed yourself to explore the path to, what elements need to be in place in order to live a long and healthy life. Most of your research is devoted to these blue zones around the world. Can you give us some insight here into exactly what these zones are, where they're located, and why they hold the secret to longevity?
So about 80% of how long you live is dictated by your environment and your lifestyle. Only about 20% is dictated by your genes. So we, in a sense, set out to reverse engineer longevity. Working with National Geographic and the demographer Michel Poulin, we identified 5 areas where people live statistically longest. So these people have achieved the outcomes we want. They've made it into their 90s or 100s without diabetes, without heart disease, without cancer, without Alzheimer's, and then they tend to die pretty quickly in their sleep. So this is not about living to 120 or 130. It's about getting the most out of what your body can offer you, which is 90 to 100 years of life without disease. And these 5 blue zones have achieved this outcome better than any place else in the world. And that's why we focused on it.
Okay. So now the life expectancy in the US is about 79 years of age. All right. Now the people that you studied living into their 90s, what is it? What is the secret?
So the average person watching this right now could probably live about 12 extra years if they optimize their lifestyle. So we're trying to distill lessons so that people can get those extra dozen years. The biggest insight, no matter where you go in the world and you find people living a long time, it's not because they have a special diet. It's not because they take herbs. It's not because they're putting some kind of hocus pocus blue serum on their face. It is because they live in an environment where the healthy choice is the easy choice. So they're eating mostly a plant-based diet because beans and tubers and greens and nuts are cheapest and most accessible. They have time-honored recipes to make them taste good. Their social networks are organized around eating this kind of food. They have a strong sense of purpose. They move every 20 minutes or so. They're nudged into some kind of movement. They tend to have religion in their life, and they put family first. So it's this ecosystem that they're surrounded with that helps them live a long time. Not because they have better willpower than us, not because they have better programming than us, not because they're better at individual responsibility. They just live in the right environment.
And this is why you're so adamant about setting up all these blue zones, correct?
Yeah, so I generally believe that if an American is overweight, right now in the year 2019, it is probably not their fault. We live in an absolutely toxic food environment. You cannot walk 5 feet without running into sugar sweetened beverages or chips or candy or hamburgers or pizzas. We're evolutionarily hardwired to crave fat, to crave sugar, to crave salt, and to take rest whenever we can. And we live in a country where 40% of all retail outlets in this country sell junk food. And I don't just mean convenience stores. I also mean tire repair shops and pharmacies and the place you get your oil changed. There's always some stand tempting you to eat some crap food, and the sharpest minds on Madison Avenue marketing them to you. We're fighting an uphill battle when it comes to eating the right way. In other words, in blue zones, their environments mindlessly encourage the right behaviors. And in America, increasingly with the standard American diet, we are pummeled with temptation to eat the wrong food.
Okay, so am I right in saying then that these blue zones where they happen to figure out how to make the healthy choice, the easy choice, are they just isolated from the rest of the westernized world?
Part of it is isolation. I mean, there's lots of unhealthy cultures that have evolved over time. There's lots of meat-based cultures where people aren't so healthy. These blue zones have evolved a lifestyle of longevity over centuries and sometimes millennia. By the way, the blue zones are in the highlands of Sardinia, longest lived men, Okinawa, Japan, longest lived women, the Nicoya Peninsula of Costa Rica, you have the lowest rate of middle-age mortality, Ikaria, Greece, and then among the Seventh-day Adventists in Loma Linda, California. So it's centuries or sometimes millennia of social evolution that get them to a diet and a lifestyle where they live a long time. And to your point, indeed, they have been somewhat isolated. So you don't have the standard American diet destroying the way they've been eating like you see in a lot of other places. So the fact that they're remote has just preserved what they've had. It's not because being remote is the key to longevity.
Okay, so let's go off of what you just said here. The Nicoya Peninsula in Costa Rica is one of the 5 blue zones. I live an hour away from Nicoya because I live in Costa Rica right here. I can drive to Nicoya, the town of Nicoya, within an hour. The first thing that I see when we get to Nicoya, Kentucky Fried
Chicken. Yes, it's an outrage.
Yeah, so you're obviously not talking about downtown Nicoya. Where in this Nicoya Peninsula are we talking about where these people are actually centenarians?
Well, when I started this work, I mean, we identified Nicoya as a blue zone in 2008. So we're now 11 years. There wasn't a Kentucky Fried Chicken there. That is the perfect example of the American food culture coming and destroying a culture of longevity. And that's what's happening. And you see in the Nicoya, the diabetes rates are soaring there because I believe the food culture is changing. But to your point, if you go outside, if you go to Ojancha, or if you go to some of the villages in San Juan Diaz, which is just very close to Nicoya, where the, I'd say, globalization hasn't reached yet, you'll still see people eating mostly beans. They're drinking black coffee. They're eating tropical fruits and vegetables. They're eating corn tortillas. These are all phenomenal foods that favor longevity, and most of people's calories are still coming from the typical lifestyle.
Okay, so the people that are listening to this interview, who are joined by us today, they are living with some form of insulin resistance, prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, or type 1 diabetes. Most of the world nowadays, unfortunately, is plagued with chronic disease, and diabetes happens to be one of the fastest growing diseases amongst the chronic diseases. In your research in the blue zones, do people have diabetes? Is it a thing? And if not, why?
I know when I first discovered these places, from about 1990 to 2008, where we have reliable data, I can tell you that diabetes was almost non-existent, type 2 diabetes. Type 1, I can't really speak to. But in the single digits percentile, probably under 5%. We know that for sure. So what what people don't really understand is the same things that drive diabetes, the same bad health habits, are also driving Alzheimer's disease, several forms of cancer, usually GI cancer, cardiovascular disease. What Blue Zones is, the type of longevity I'm talking about, is not some kind of hocus pocus raising the capacity of the human machine. It is avoiding the diseases that foreshorten your life, like diabetes. And the right lifestyle is going to drive down all those bad diseases that steal good life away from you.
Yeah, that's such an important point. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about chronic stress. So we know that plays an important role in the development of many diseases. So can you talk to us a little bit about why stress and unhappiness affect our health and what it is about the longest lived people on earth that allowed them to live long, happy lives with relatively low stress?
Yeah, so people who live in blue zones suffer the same pressures, day-to-day pressures that we do. They're not special people. They don't have some kind of cultural advantage that allows them to dodge the stress that we feel. But they do have sacred daily rituals that reduce the stress. The Adventists pray. The Costa Ricans and the Icarians take naps. The Okinawans have ancestor veneration. The Sardinians do happy hour. Something to reverse the stress of everyday living. But one thing you should be aware of, that stress takes many shapes. Whenever you're in a hurry or worried or under pressure, that triggers the inflammatory response. Whenever you drink a soda and eat a meaty meal, that subtly inflames your GI tract. And if you open up your GI tract, it has the surface area of a tennis court. Whenever you're too tired, whenever you work out too hard, these are all triggering the same inflammatory mechanisms that the typical form of stress. So when you're talking about stress, you want to look at that whole kind of dashboard of things that cause inflammation. And in blue zones, they're eating mostly a plant-based diet, so their GI tract isn't overwhelmed, isn't inflamed. They have sacred daily rituals to reverse the stress, the hurry, and the worry. They don't suffer. They have a sense of purpose, so they don't wake up in the morning worried about what the heck am I doing on this planet? Well, my purpose for being here. They're not suffering this existential threat. They have religion that gives them a clear path to walk during the day. Many of these blue zones areas, and they're not working out. They're not running triathlons and pumping iron. They live in an environment where they're moving gently, they're walking, they're gardening, so they're not overstressing their muscles and getting stressed there. So you look at the whole package, their inflammatory load is much lower. And as you all know, inflammation is the root of every major age-related disease.
So if somebody's listening to this and they want to reduce their chronic stress, what's the number one suggestion you would give them?
Eat a plant-based diet. Know your sense of purpose. And when I say that, I mean know your values, know what you're good at, know what you like to do, and have an outlet for it. So that might be at work, but usually it's with friends or it's some volunteer. Makes a huge difference. And I would say get out of your head that the notion of health is going out and beating your body, biking 100 miles a day, or triathlons or marathons or CrossFit. Your body will forgive you if you're 20. But if you're 30s, 40s, 50s, you should be thinking of regular low-intensity physical activity like walking and gardening, biking, playing tennis, rather than working out too hard.
You know, I was with you up until you said CrossFit. Until you said that, I think I don't agree with you at this point.
Well, I'm just saying, I can guarantee you that none of these people in blue zones living to 100 ever did CrossFit. So it may work, and it's just not. I didn't mean to call that out specific.
No, I'm joking. I'm joking. It's totally fine. Well, I mean, talk to us about the exercise habits of the longest lived populations, because when I read your book, one of the things that you stress is that they don't exercise, right? It's not that they're not going to the gym and they're not doing a spinning class, but they just integrate movement into their daily patterns. So could you go into a little bit of detail about what movement patterns long lived populations have?
Yeah. So trying to change your behavior, trying to join gyms or get on programs, they occasionally work for the short run, but they fail for almost all the people almost all the time. So trying to change your behavior is not a good plan. In blue zones, their homes are set up so they're not full of mechanized conveniences. They're not pushing a button for yard work and another button to push for housework and another button to push for kitchen work. They're grinding their corn by hand or making bread by hand or cleaning up their yards with hand implements. And or shoveling their snow with a shovel. So you may roll your eyes at that as seeming incredibly Luddite, but you have to realize that over the course of the day, if you're doing your work by hand, all of those calories count. The Okinawans, their furniture is basically very low, or they sit on the floor. So they're getting up and down from the floor 20 or 30 times a day. Well, that's 30 squats. And whether you do it in one compressed time or you do it over the course of a day, you still get the benefit of it. So they have better balance. They fall down less. They're getting their physical activity. Uniformly in all blue zones, and this is a powerful nudge, is going out and digging a garden. Because once you dig the garden and plant some seeds for foods you want to eat, you're more likely to get out and weed and water and harvest and hoe. And that's regular, low intensity physical activity, range of motion. And for fun, they'll go out and take a walk with their friends. Their communities are not, well, every time you go to work or go to a friend's house or go out to eat, it occasions a walk. So that's what I mean by every 20 minutes or so, they're moving. And over the course of the day, they're burning way more calories than they would burn if they sat at their office or sat on the couch all day long and then tried to make it up in a half hour at the gym. That's not the way we're designed. We're evolutionarily designed to move all day long. And that's the way it's done in blue zones. And moving all day long is much more a function of your surroundings than it is of discipline or any sort of behavior modification.
You know, one of the great things about your recommendations is they're very simple and they're very practical. It's not overwhelming. And I think that's part of the reason your books are so popular. I know people love your cookbook. It's beautiful. Can you tell us where people can find more about you and your books?
Bluezones.com. We have a calculator where you can calculate your life expectancy. I did a TED Talk. If you want to see what's in the books, you can look at the TED Talk. We're not big on selling anything, but I'd love for you to come visit our website or at Blue Zones on social media. I just love evangelizing this work.
Dan, what is your life expectancy right now based off of your quiz?
Based off my quiz, I'm 93 or 94, which is kind of the ceiling. I probably have optimal. I mean, I have the best chance of reaching. But the reality is for a male right now, an average male, I don't know what my genes are, if I have any special genes, but if I have an average set of genes, I should be able to hit age 90, 92. A woman will get another couple, 2-3 years. But here's something interesting. Since 1840, every decade, the average life expectancy of humans has gone up 2 years. So if that trend continues, I'm in my 50s, my expectancy is 90s, that's another 4 decades times 2 years. I could very well reach 100. I'd be very happy hitting 100 and going out with a smile on my face.
I'm actually pretty curious, from having gone through and done so much investigative research here into the lifestyle habits of people in blue zones, how did that change your life? What are the habits that maybe you identified that weren't serving you properly, and how have you changed them?
I'd say the biggest thing, I'm about 99% plant-based. which I wasn't before. I don't work nearly as hard. I think working like an American is a fool's errand. For the most part, I quit working by 4 or 5 every afternoon. And by the way, I get just as much done. I am an absolute platoon sergeant about getting my 7 to 8 hours of sleep. I take naps. These are things that I would let slide by the wayside because I thought, well, I'll beat my body right now and work super hard for some imagined better life in the future. And the reality is the imagined life in the future only comes about 50% of the time. So you're better off optimizing. I'm also really big on friendships. I have triaged a lot of, I would say, semi-toxic or unuseful people in my life. And I've been very careful about surrounding myself with cool people like you guys who are going to help support the right behaviors, right? I mean, my life is surrounded by vegetarian and vegan friends. So I don't even have to think about not eating a steak or not eating a hamburger. When we go out to eat, we're always going to the place where the plant-based food is way more delicious. And these great restaurants where people are eating. And when I go over to my friend's house, nobody's giving me baby back ribs. They're giving me, some wonderful bean or tofu dish, which I happen to love. So I've really curated a group of friends around me that's made living the right way easy.
That last point is actually really important because I know a lot of people, one of the most common complaint that we get from people who are changing their lifestyle towards a more plant-based diet is they say it's hard to eat when I go out to a restaurant. It's hard to eat when I go to a friend's house because their environment does not support their lifestyle choices. But what you're saying is you intentionally made it a point to surround yourself with other people that are very like-minded. And as a result of that, it's not even a conversation anymore. Where do you want to go out? You're going to go to the same, you're going to go to a restaurant that's going to be able to feed you, because that's the way you've constructed your lifestyle. And I think that's actually a really, really, really important point that a lot of people who are transitioning to a plant-based diet can learn a lot about.
Yeah. And to put a fine point on it, it's not necessarily making a friend who's like-minded. It's making a friend who you aspire to health-wise. So that's usually finding some healthy vegetarian or vegan and proactively bringing them in your social circle. It's a very counterintuitive way to get healthier because we have such a diet and supplement and, we're going to follow this food program, but I'd rather follow the person. So the prescriptive is find a healthy plant-based person and make them your friend.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's brilliant.
Or date a Kathy Freston, for example.
Yeah, that helps. So, Dan, thanks so much for taking the time to be here with us today. The lessons that you've uncovered not only today, but also just in the Blue Zones philosophy, they're simple, they're effective, and they're applicable. They're something that anyone can apply to their life if they choose to. So, your research has changed the way millions of people live their life. And we really appreciate all the hard work that you're doing to surface the simplicity that truly is powerful. So thank you so much for doing that.
Well, thank you. I don't do a lot of these things, but I'm such a big believer in what you guys actually have a program that works, not just for diabetic people, but I wish the Department of Health and Human Services would just hire you two guys to take it over. We'd have a healthier America.
All right. Well, that's the mission of the Blue Zones 2.0.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thanks a lot, my man. Appreciate it.
All right. Bye-bye.